Hi everyone, welcome to our seminar talk for spring 2021. So I'm happy to kick off like this seminar with the first talk with Dr. Weber with his team, and we are glad to have his team to talk about analyzing feeling and emotion in social media. So I will hand it to Dr. Weber to introduce himself and his team. So.
Yeah, hi. So let's get started right away because we have a lot to cover in hopefully in 40 minutes. Okay, so first about the topic. So I broke this down from the abstract. The general situation is that many purchasing decisions nowadays are based on feelings and emotions, and marketing is increasingly moving online. So understanding emotions in social media is therefore becoming a critical component of digital marketing and new product development. So today we're going to present three perspectives on analyzing feelings and emotions in social media, two from the point of view of practitioners and one from the point of view of an academic. We'll also show two videos of recent studies conducted by the presenters. So finally, we will then engage as usual in a discussion session at the end. What I'd like to ask you is to hold your questions to the end. Maybe if it's a true clarification question, we'll like to have it because I want to make sure all the other two speakers get their full contingent in before we have the general discussion. So every one of us is going to go through an outline like this. We're going to introduce each other, then motivations for the research, then the perspectives of the participants, and we're going to have two research samples that include videos, and then we'll have a general discussion. So first about myself, professors like to talk about themselves, but we don't have time. So I'm introducing this slide, which pretty much is my life history or my professional history in one slide. The major message is I went back and forth between work and academia. And before I became a professor, I had a long career in the semiconductor industry. So that gave rise to my research interests, which are organizational learning, innovation, and knowledge management, which I originally conducted in the semiconductor industry. But more recently, I developed an interest in social media analytics, which was inspired by doctoral students, primarily Nithin and Bhavana, from whom you'll be hearing today. And also, social media has a large volumes of data are made available, so you can do studies that you couldn't do before. One of my primary lessons from the new setting is that knowledge and emotion are becoming increasingly difficult to separate, and we will probably talk about that at the end of the presentation. So now I'm going to introduce Nithin. So Dr. Nithin Mayande has been an independent consultant in virtual social network design since 2008. He is a co-founder and chief scientist at Telligence Corporation, a social media analytics firm. He received his training in communication engineering in India, and he holds an MS and a PhD in technology management from our department. So Nithin, go ahead, take it away.
So thank you very much. I'm really pleased to be here. I remember attending these seminars as a student. They were very useful. So I'm hoping I can do the same today, right? So before we start, I just wanted to give a brief background on why we started doing this, right? So primarily, I believe that like the way our digital footprint is evolving. What I mean by that is previously we used to lead a one screen life, which was essentially a TV, right? From that, we evolved into a two screen life, which was your TV and your computer. And now we are in a three screen life, which is your TV, computer, and then your cell phone, right? So, but what is interesting is the phase that we are in, the order of these screens is changing. TV is no longer the primary screen, it's your cell phone, right? It is your cell phone and then it's your computer, and then it's your TV. So, so because of this, even over a period of last 5 to 10 years, what your digital footprint looks like is changing a lot, right? People have become more and more aggressive because now you have social networks, right, which you can access through mobile devices, and there is no lag in communication anymore. You're not restricted to sitting in front of a computer or even opening a laptop, right? If you see something, you can express yourself pretty much immediately, either through a video or a text, on Twitter, on Facebook, and then so many different channels, right? So there is a live audience, and what this has done is primarily moved from a broadcast style of communication to more an interactive medium, right? And uh, this is giving a very new phenomena that have never happened before, and that is also because uh, there were never that many number of people connected online. And this is where we started saying that, okay, like, then in this scenario, how do organizations even make decisions, or how do organizations even start understanding their audience, or what do they want, right? You'll hear later Bhavana expressing how do marketers make a decision about the emotions and feelings, right, to market their product. And that is where this started. The research interest started. I mean, in social networks it's very broad, but with the emotions, um, this was the core crux of it, that how do we decipher emotions in online social network to better understand our audience's digital footprint, right? So uh, this is our research interest, and if you have any questions regarding this, I'll be very happy to answer. And today what I'll be presenting is one of the research papers that I presented at Informs. um,
Okay, so now I'm going to start the video.
Hello everyone, I'm Nithin Mayande, and today I'll be speaking about building emotional vectors using social media, a case using Twitter data. So the problem statement is sentiment analysis for online social network is limited to valence, which is positive, negative, and neutral. So this explains what happened, but it eludes why and how. So we propose moving beyond sentiment and understanding the emotion behind the sentiment. Now, our research questions are emotions better at explaining online phenomena than sentiments? And do emotions have better predictive power than sentiment? Now, in order to address these two research questions, we need a method to build vectors that identify emotions. So what we are doing here is first we'll be gathering data about all the 8 emotions, and then we'll be building emotional vectors for each of the emotions, and then we'll be evaluating them using the 3 machine learning algorithms which we found through literature: logistic regression, naive Bayes, and support vector machine. And this is the standard process steps for any machine learning project. We'll be collecting data, cleansing data, pre-processing, and filtering the data. And we'll be building the vectors using pointwise mutual information and testing them through multiple algorithms. So in cleansing, pre-processing, and filtering, what we are really doing is first we collected data for a little over a year, and then we look at tweets which have emotional hashtags, but the hashtag should be placed at the end of the tweet, not in the middle of the tweet. And then we remove any tweet, filter off any tweet that has less than 5 words, or if it's a retweet, if it's a non-English tweet, or has more than 3 hashtags. We also strip out all the URLs and remove the stop words from the tweets so that we can do some lemmatization on the data. For metrics, we are using the standard machine learning algorithm metrics like accuracy, precision, recall, and S-score. So I won't go very deep into this. But in this case, what we are also doing is for all the data that we have collected weekly for over a period of year, we are using 70% of that to for training purposes and 30% of that for the testing purposes. Now you see here is data per week aggregated for pretty much over a year, right? So you can see that the volume is not constant. It varies. At the lowest, you see volume around like 5,000. At the highest, it's somewhere around 17,500. And you form certain keywords for the data that's collected per week. Now, it's very clear that there is no absolute correlation between the number of tweets in a week and the keywords generated in a week. Now, this is an important distinction specifically for social data, because in other data like offline data or curated text or news articles, what happens is as the length of the article increases, the number of keywords also increases. But that's not the case in the social media. Now, for the same data, you see the split on a weekly basis for the tweets and the keywords, pretty much for the whole of the year. And it's very clear that some emotions dominate the conversation over others. For example, in this data, what you can see is that joy and sad are the primary emotions in the conversation. So most of the tweets have this emotion. Disgust, fear, and trust to some extent, but not as huge in volume as joy and sad. And angry, anticipation, and surprise pretty much have negligible volume. So we will not consider angry, anticipation, and surprise because of their negligible volume for further analysis. Then what we do is in the next slide, we increase the point-wise mutual information between the tweet and the emotion, right? So as we move from 0 to forward, like at pretty much at point 4, what you can see is on certain weeks, all the emotional data goes to 0 because they don't have a keyword that meets that level of point-wise mutual information between the emotion and the keyword. So that's the reason why we will not consider data above point 3 moving forward, because up till point 3 we get pretty much we have enough keywords and enough data every week. So I pretty much covered this one. So for the first one, we go through logistic regression, and you can see from an accuracy point of view that the best accuracy range for us for logistic regression is given at the PMI of point 3, right? So the range there is 0.93 to 0.1. That means it produces the most accurate emotional vectors at a PMI of 0.3 when we consider it on a weekly basis. So now what we are looking at is we are looking at the precision recall and F1 at point 3 for each emotion. Now, as we earlier mentioned, we are not considering angry, anticipation, and surprise because they do not have enough data. And out of joy and sad, only joy really forms a good emotional vector. As you can see, the range for joy is between 0.92 um, uh, 0.92 and 0.97 and 1 actually. And sad, well, it has a little bit more wider range, pretty much like 0.5 to zero point 0.1. And disgust, fear, and trust, they form like decent emotional vectors, so we'll consider them. Now in naive Bayes, the same thing happens, that we see that the best accuracy there, we get it at PMI when it is at 0.3. So the range of PMI here is 0.75 to zero point 0.1. Now it is a little greater than logistic regression, but still that is the best range that we get for naive Bayes. Now, when we look at the precision recall and F1 for each emotion at point 3, we pretty much get similar results, except for one major difference, that in this case, neither joy nor sad forms a good emotional vector at all, whereas these were the dominating conversations. And then we move towards support vector machine, and in support vector machine we get the accuracy of 0.84 to 1, same again at the PMI greater than pretty much at 0.3. And when we move on to the precision recall and F1 of each emotion at 0.3, we get the pretty similar results. We are not considering angry, anticipation, and surprise because of lack of data. Out of joy and sad, again, only joy forms really good emotional vectors. And you can see that disgust, fear, and trust from like good emotional vectors too. So what you see here is that when you don't have, so the conclusions here are basically when there's no correlation between tweets and keywords generated per week, because high volume of tweets and low volume of keywords are indicative of a very focused yet popular conversation. right? And angry, anticipation, and surprise do not really form meaningful emotional vectors due to negligible amount of data. And as we increase the PMI for requirements between the keywords and the emotions, that actually reduces the number of keywords in each emotion, thereby reducing the number of tweets in each emotion. So in this study, what we found was for this particular purposes, PMI greater than 3 is not considered, because at PMI, we get uh, the best results. And between all the different machine learning algorithms that we have used, we got logistic regression produced the most accurate results, where the emotional vector ranged from 0.93 to 1 accuracy. And of course, joy, disgust, fear, and trust form good emotional vectors with logistic regression on the weekly data. Now, there are many implications for this research, because as we understand emotions behind the sentiments, they can have a huge impact uh, in designing your customer relationship systems, right? You understanding what is the state of a customer's emotional state, and then responding to that, or understanding perception towards politicians, movies, multiple products, countries, and other target entities, right? And also developing very sophisticated search algorithms that distinguish between different emotional states associated with the product. And of course, there are many more, but here are just a few to name. So our future work, what we will be doing is we'll be repeating this experiment for larger aggregations. For example, with this one, we did only 1 week of aggregation, but we'll aggregate the data in the future for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, and see if the results vary or not. And then we'll also be doing like looking at the predictive power of the emotions, which means that the vectors that we build this week or in this aggregation period, how will they perform for the future aggregations? So with that, I end my presentation, and happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
So,
Okay, about the questions, maybe we can postpone them. This was Nithin on video, and now he's back. We're back live.
so like you see, the idea here is to build those emotional vectars so we can really go, and from raw text, we can identify what are the specific emotions. And at this point, what I'll do is I'll let Bhavana speak a little bit more on how the marketers are actually using these kind of emotional vectors, or this capability to identify emotions in online marketing perspective. And Bhavana is a current PhD student at ETM, but she has a very broad and vast experience in the industry too. I mean, she's worked with companies like Accenture, Procter & Gamble, Boeing, to name a few. And currently she's working as a data scientist at PK Globe. So with that, Bhavana, I'll let you take it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction and great video. Again, I'm very happy to be here talking about my research and the work that I do. To start off with, yes, I work as a data scientist at a company called PK Global. We are a Portland-based company, but we are really global. Brief description about my job is that I work as a data scientist from a consultant point of view, which means I spend a ton of time talking to clients and understanding what their actual vision is for their business and trying to connect dots and see how data science can really help them. So broadly speaking, data scientists are generally two types of people. One that develop a lot of algorithms. They are really mathematical oriented. They look at properly, beautifully fitting algorithms, but I am mostly on the application side of it. I take the concepts of data science, modify it to fit a specific need of the client. So that is my very high level data science work that I'm doing. I have been working on multiple domains as well. I have been working as a healthcare. I've used emotion-based analysis in healthcare systems, in digital platforms, in aerospace. But right now, as we speak, my main focus is helping marketing and branding side of business, bringing in the perspective of the needs of data science and trying to connect dots with emotions. In the line of work that I'm doing, one key shift that I'm seeing generally in marketing space is that in previous times in traditional marketing, understanding human behavior was not a new thing, right? We have always wanted to understand why somebody, what is the purchasing nature of a person, how many products is the buyer buying. So we have always been curious about understanding human behavior. But the key shift with so much of data that is available today is moving away from just understanding how much, how many, to why. So understanding why somebody behaves the way they behave is a primary question that every marketer is trying to answer at certain level using their own little tool set, skill set, and understanding that they come up with. So that has been a very key change in the shift because of digital data and the availability that we have. Now, why emotions are important, right? Emotions are important because it really might help us. We really believe that it might help us understand why somebody behaves the
We
way they
lost you.
behave. Jen, can you hear me now?
Yeah, now, yeah,
Can
yes,
you,
now.
yeah, I'm going to turn off my video just so it could be my internet. The importance of emotions, the main key challenge to doing the marketing motions, using emotions, is that we want to believe that most of the purchase decisions is really rational. But let me tell you, it's really not rational. Sometimes people just buy products because of intuition, because they feel like buying. They just buy. They Most of the times it's really hard to put a pin and say why somebody bought. And we have all faced that, right? We have all made that impulsive buying, or just buying without knowing exactly and how I'm going to use a product. So I believe that in marketing space, understanding how emotions really impact human behavior has been super critical for marketing and brand building. And that is really interesting as well. However, the key challenge to this idea of understanding emotions in order to understand human behavior is that emotions are kind of fickle, right? A person can go from being fearful to anger to sad and literally forgetting about it the next second. So if you see emotions constantly keep changing, it is never a stable thing. So working or coming with a model that really takes into account the fickleness that emotion brings in, or the variability that emotion brings in, and finding a solution that is repeatable is quite an interesting problem to solve. And that has been a very base or soul or core of my research interest. So we will be playing a video, and before playing a video, the video that I will be talking about is that it's a concept where we will be looking at complex human emotions. Generally speaking, there are 8 human emotions. There are several human emotions, but primarily going by theory, there are 8 emotions. And we will see how to construct complex set of 28 emotions in the video.
Okay.
There you go.
Hi, my name is Bhavana, and today I'm the presenter of our topic, which is what do complex human emotions tell about opinion polarity on social media? We have a very simple agenda. We have a problem statement, research questions, why we are doing this research, some important definitions, the framework that we want to introduce in order to mine the complex human emotions, results, and insights. Human psychology literature review shows us that humans display a wide range of emotions, and emotions do influence people's opinion. However, in social media research, sentiment analysis has only been limited to identifying positive or negative sentiments. The current state of art on social media sentiment analysis lacks a deeper understanding on the complex emotions expressed on social media and their influence on the polarity. Here, we propose a framework that will identify 8 primary emotions and 28 secondary or complex emotions. From this research, we want to see what and how emotions drive opinion polarity on social media. We started off with a fundamental question, which was how do complex emotions help us enhance our understanding? And do conflicting emotions contribute to opinion polarity? In order to address these two things, we looked at Plotchick's Wheel of Emotions and used that as a fundamental basis for our framework. People discuss all sort of things on social media. People express their opinions and experiences with respect to products. They have huge group discussion that's going on. People write mini blogs, big blogs. People also use social media for bringing in social causes. So if I'm a decision maker, it is important for me to understand what people are thinking and what people are feeling so that I can make better decisions. When looking at defining human emotions, we fundamentally look at the definitions in psychology as well as social media studies. Psychologists define emotions, sentiments, and opinions a little differently from each other. However, on social media, emotion, sentiment, opinions are all subjective terms and are used interchangeably. And in this research, we will be doing the same. Sentiment and opinions are used interchangeably for this research. As I said, we based off our framework on Plotchick's Wheel of Emotion. Plotchick is a very famous psychologist who came up with the petal wheel that is on the right side of the chart of the presentation. He identified 8 primary emotions in human beings, and he also said we can combine 8 primary emotions to come up with a secondary emotion, which is also called as complex emotions. The example of that is when you mix joy and trust, which are primary emotions, we come up with love to be the secondary emotion. He also said that primary emotions can be polar opposite, which means joy is opposite of sadness, trust opposite of disgust, and it goes on. With the plot wheel of emotions, and we constructed an 8 by 8 matrix using primary emotions, and we derived 28 complex emotions, which is as shown in our columns and rows in the pictures. This is our framework. We call this complex emotion determinant model. There are 5 steps to this. The first step is to identify topic and gather relevant data. Data cleaning goes in the step. Tokenizing of data and collecting words for analysis goes in the step. The second step is identifying and labeling the words with primary emotions. And to do this, we use NCR dictionary, which is also emotion-based dictionary. Step 3 is taking these 8 emotions, primary emotions, and constructing the 8 by 8 matrix to identify complex emotions and labeling them accordingly. The fourth step is to create an emotion graph, which is a kind of network graph to identify the underlying primary and secondary emotions and its strength. By looking and analyzing the graphs, we will be able to see the opinion polarity if it exists on social media for this very topic that we are talking about. We chose a super hot topic, which is presidential election 2020, and the data was gathered right after the first presidential debate. We classified all the things that both the candidates spoke about and classified them into social, economical, and environmental issues. We looked at relevant keywords and mined the tweets. There were around 350,000 tweets that we looked into for this analysis. We did a ton of data cleaning. Okay, this is the result. And this slide denotes all the keywords and the emotion that goes with the word racism or anything related to racism. Those were the tweets that were identified here. The notes denote primary emotion. They just denote the secondary emotion. This is the network of emotion graph. Negative, positive, and mixed emotions are denoted by red, green, and orange lines. The emotions are denoted by the thickness of the line. Here for racism, as an example, the secondary or the complex emotions identified are hope, sentimentality, and submission. The primary emotions are trust, anticipation, and sadness. There are 53% negative words used and 47% positive words that were used. This is the same thing for Affordable Care Act as our search term. Trust, anticipation, and surprises are the secondary emotions. Confusion and curiosities are primary. There are more negative words than positive. This is for COVID-19. There are more positive words than the negative words. And this is the graph for economy. And this is the graph for environmental related keywords. If you look, primary emotion has fear in it, and secondary emotion has anxiety, and there are so many more negative words than positive words. Final results in the observation. We can talk about the graphs as much as we can, but due to time constraint, I have to move, but get in touch with us if you want to see what we have done. The key observations and insights are the complex emotion, which is the secondary emotions, can be detected on social media, even though we haven't done it so far. When we break primary emotions into secondary emotions, there are more negative emotions than the positive ones. Hope and sentimentality are the most observed emotions that is related to US presidential elections. Polarity can be measured solely based on cannot be measured solely based on complex emotion. However, polarity could be a collective function of positive and negative emotions. There is no correlation between opposite emotions, which means even though joy is opposite to sadness in real life, that has no reflection on social media at all. And this was a snapshot of what happened in that particular time when the tweets was collected, but this could change as time progresses and events change. For future research, we want to implement the same framework on various topics and larger data sets. We want to use other lexicon dictionaries as well and implement machine learning and opinion mining algorithms to identify complex emotions. This is about the author. Get in touch with us if you need more information on this. Thank you.
Okay, let's bring the slides back. Okay, yeah, Bhavana, why don't you tell us a bit about your anticipated dissertation research?
Yeah, happy to. Before getting into the dissertation topic, I want to kind of explain what collective emotions are on social media, because that is a core concept that I'm trying to work on. Let's take an example. Say a person is feeling some kind of emotions. Two things can happen, right? Say a person is feeling angry. The outcome of anger that the person is feeling can either lead him to take an action, or he can say, okay, I am feeling angry, but I won't do anything about it, and he cannot do anything about it. So on an individual level, understanding human emotions is okay, it's important, but looking at it from the marketing perspective, we need to understand more so on how general people are feeling than how one person is feeling. So now taking that individual concept into collective emotional concept, which says that if a group of people feel certain type of emotions, then there is only one outcome that can come out of it, which is change in the culture. So that is more powerful than to study when it comes to marketing than just looking at individual emotions. So my dissertation really touches upon understanding the phenomena of collective emotions. that could happen on social media, and we have seen that over and over again, right? When people are angry, they form mobs, and social media will be used as a platform to gather together, and it creates certain kind of motions for cultural change, for social change. So it brings some kind of change. I want to take that concept and implement it from the perspective of marketing and see how we can use collective emotions as a force to bring out user actions on social media or user engagement on social media. In order to do that, there will be multiple touch points or multiple insights that I am hoping to get out of this dissertation, which could be over a period of time. How does emotion shift from one to another? Because we have seen in the previous researches that emotions do shift. Overall, I want to have a complete packaging onto the observation of emotional phenomena on social media, mostly from a very high level collective emotions perspective. That's what I'm intending to do.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I guess, yeah, thank you for your attention. So I guess we can start the question and answer session, and I will quit sharing screen so we can all see each other's faces. Okay. I'll hand it over to whoever wants. I'm having an echo. Are you hearing that too?
Okay. So for the questions, so feel free if you guys want to unmute. I think we have an echo because I think many of you it's unmuted. So
I'll
uh,
mute.
yeah, okay. So for the question, so feel free to write your question in a chat, or you can unmute and speak loud and ask your question. So I give the capability for everyone, they can ask the question. So
if I may start and kick it off. This
yep.
is super interesting. I'm wondering to what extent the social media matters for your analysis technique. It sounded to me like you are looking at tweets as texts and then look at what emotions are expressed in this large number of texts. But could this be newspaper articles? Could this be forum posts?
Yes, I'll take that question, assuming it was directed to me. Yes, it could be analyzed in any textual format, but it could also be analyzed in, say, yeah, newspaper or any form, literally. But the reason why we are doing social media is because it gives us a connection point, right? If I am calling Dr. Nithin and saying something to him that is directed, then you can actually see that Bhavana is actually telling this to Dr. Nithin only and not anybody else, right? So social media gives us an understanding on how people are related to each other. How are they connected? Do they follow each other? Are they mentioning certain type of people, which cannot just be identified by a newspaper article or emotions that is coming from a wiki page? So understanding human network structure along with the textual information is really key to understanding the phenomena.
And one other part that is important to consider there is that with newspaper articles, can we analyze emotions? And definitely. But newspaper is a very structured and a very organized, it's edited language. So it's a lot more easier to do in newspaper in structured language. Whereas when you look at unstructured language and something like Twitter, the vocabulary is not limited, right? Like, and there is language is always evolving in those mediums in a very unstructured format. And for especially marketers, understanding that language, like what are people feeling about this in real time, could be very, very lot more, um, you know, a handier tool when they're designing their marketing campaigns on these social media platforms.
Anything on the chat session, Maulud?
I didn't see any question in the chat yet, so
People, you need to ask questions, or I will keep asking questions.
Okay, good.
Then you will be
Good
bored.
practice for what's coming up.
So maybe the second half of my question. So you're running this analysis, you're using a psychological model, and you claim, okay, based on your analysis, you know what the emotion was because it was expressed in a particular way. Is there any way of testing if people actually experience that emotion? Is there some outside validation for an algorithm like that?
There is actually, and I can forward you those articles, but fundamentally what they have done is through Mechanical Turk, right? They took a set of tweets, maybe like around like 11,000 tweets or something like that, and actually got them annotated. Because the challenge with identifying emotion in social network is like people who express the emotion they may not belong to the same demographic, same age group, so the variability is huge, right? So instead what was done was they selected folks on Mechanical Turk and got those set of tweets annotated by like, okay, what emotion do you think this tweet belongs to, right? And then they figured out what the inter annotator reliability is for each tweets, which means that if there are 10 annotators, how many of them said this is a emotion, like same emotion for everybody identified that tweet like same emotion, or 50% of them identified with like two different. So they figured out what consistency it comes out to. So that gives you an idea, saying that if people were to sit and do the emotional, judge that sentence by the emotion, what it is. Now they took this algorithm and ran it through the emotion and said like, okay, how does this identify and how well it aligns with that, right? So that is with the Mechanical Turk. Now what they did was, second study that they did was they took psychologists, experts who at identifying emotions, and they said, okay, now you guys do this, and said what is their variability, because they are a controlled group. Psychologists are the controlled expert groups. Now they said, okay, what is your variability compared to random folks on Mechanical Turk, and what these algorithms are doing. And they were found very fairly consistent.
Okay, there is another question comes from the chat. One of the audience wondering how to measure the people real emotion compared with the social media emotion. So
I think I fail to understand the question. I mean, simply because
So she's wondering how can compare or measure the real emotion and compare it with the social media emotion. So I think like people emotion in the social media, it's different with the real emotion. And if there's any way how to measure or to compare like real emotion and compare it with the social emotion and try if there is any differences.
so we've not really found a huge difference between real emotion and social emotion from a simple, because when we are um, looking at phenomena simply like fake news, or Black Lives Matters, or when we are assessing phenomena like that, the real world emotion versus what we are seeing in social media aligns pretty well, actually. Or even
So if I have to take a stab at that question, I don't differentiate between real emotion to the emotion that is not real on social media, right? Social media emotions are still the emotions that are expressed by real people on social media. So it's social media is just a platform, and there is no real separation between what a real emotion is and what a not so real emotion is. All we're trying to do is look at people's expression on social media, which they use text as an expression medium, and we try and mine to see what emotions are they expressing and try and use that as a part of research.
Any other questions? Because I'd have one if nobody else does.
there is another two question in the chat.
Okay, go ahead.
also.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, you can you see them like Dr. Weber in the chat, or do you want me to read?
Okay, go.
Yeah, I can actually see this. So one question is the dictionary used for the English language? If so, any thoughts on multilingual use of the model? Um, so, so in this particular field, there are two ways that you come up, right? Like one is you actually use the dictionary and put an emotional score to the words. That's one way of doing it. The other way is basically what you look at is you don't really necessarily put a score to the word, but see how well any word aligns with any word. It can be from any language, right? Because we've seen cases where people write in dual language, like half the sentences in one language or half the sentences in another language, right? Like, so in those cases also what we have found is like in my model, what I use is mutual information. So basically looking at any particular word and what is that information it conveys with respect to that emotion, right? So uh, some of these methods are language agnostic.
And also, this is a growing science. I would say this whole science of NLP and understanding emotions from text is at very nascent stage, and that's one of the reasons why we are using dictionary to base off to understand the emotional words. As and when the whole field moves towards, then I think machine learning and auto detecting emotional words will become the next big thing. I think we are getting there, but dictionary is a very good place where we can start when we don't have any context or any systems in place already available for us to work through it. So I can read the next question coming from Bobby. He says, have you considered coupling the identification of emotional states with techniques of migrating negative emotions? It sounds like a way of psychologists to mitigate negative emotions using electronic rather than chemicals. Yes. Again, as I said, this is very super, it's at its basic sciences. And just to get to the place where we are, we had to bring in interdisciplinary aspects. We have to bring in computation power. We have to bring in theories that is based on proven psychological researches, right? And the more you look at emotional research, just from the perspective of psychology, that in itself has a lot of contradicting theories that comes out from it, right? So having said that, we used wheel of emotions because that is the standard to identify human emotions. And we can start off there before understanding or before exploring other theories. And yes, one of the best things to do is mitigate negative emotions by using positive emotions. That is where the first step is identifying what emotion is going on social media. And then we can see how we can bring certain kind of campaigns or intervention plans to mitigate those.
Great. There is also another question after that. It's someone, they said like emotion expressed through text is just a part of like the whole psychology like of emotion. So uh, they would argue that what's expressed in social media may not like be the complete picture of the emotion of the person. So
Maybe I can take that. What Deepti is saying is absolutely correct, but it's, as of now, it's probably the best we have. You know, I mean, how do you analyze your emotions before we had social media? Do you do you lay down on a couch with a psychiatrist, or, you know, so yes, social media emotions may not be the complete picture, but it's the best way we can gather lots of data. I mean, what got me into this is the ability to do my research on sample sizes of millions instead of, one-on-one, like I used to do in the semiconductor industry. I used to interview somebody, and I was like really happy that I got 99 data points for my dissertation. Right here, you get millions, and big data leads you to discover all kinds of phenomena that you wouldn't otherwise find.
And next is your question, Dr. Weber. Next is your question, I guess. How credible is the wheel of emotion?
Yeah, I have that one to both of you, right? It looks really neat on a slide. Okay, does it mean it's true? I mean, how does how
The only way of answering that is, I guess, how credible is anything, right? Like,
well, okay,
to some extent,
yeah.
right? Especially when there's research done, right? Is it just somebody's imagination, this wheel? It's not. It's come through the field of psychology where they have where different models have been built, and this is one of the more popular models. And as with science, as we know more, models evolve, and what we know can be falsified or deemed not true as we know more about it. But as far as the current state of knowledge is, this is how much we know.
Actually, I'm remiss. I should have read all of Plotchick's papers before doing this, and I haven't done that. Maybe we should really look into how he actually came up with that.
Yeah, and again, the idea is to just take that as a base, not necessarily question the validity of the field of psychology, but instead, like a platform that they have built, can we build methods around that to help marketers? Build. Now, is the whole field of psychology or true? I don't think I'm qualified to
Well, I'm
answer.
not calling the whole field of psychology, but for example, if we now, especially the two of you, forge ahead and do really wonderful things for business on a theory that might not be real, what value, what have we done? We have another question here. To what extent are the models you have created transferred to the next? I have 100+ one-page text, which people talk about COVID. Could you detect emotion in there? I'll give that to the others.
Yes.
As a matter of fact,
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Nithin.
we have been doing that to some extent. At least I've been doing that to some extent, especially since last March. We've been looking at the evolution of emotion with respect to COVID, like how has it translated from like anxiety to like a fear to more like relief and things like that as this COVID and different stages it has evolved. So we've to some extent we've been tracking that. And
I guess if I may jump in, my question is really more, I'm still a little concerned about this external validation. And I think Dipti's point of is well taken, that you detect something, you claim that's the true emotion that this person is experiencing. And there's this one thing, your model might be wrong. And there's the second thing, maybe what people do and experience on social media doesn't relate so well to what they do and experience in the real world. So in this particular case, my data set includes a questionnaire where people are asked about their level of emotion with regard to certain, so they self-characterize emotion. And so you have one text that's completely independent of the questionnaire. Could you detect emotion in there and maybe calibrate or validate or test your model based on that?
Yeah, if I may answer that. Absolutely. The way right now the models we are looking at is we take all the text that is given to us, we identify what words do people use to express emotions, right? They might not right away say, I'm feeling sad. It could come in a form of text that said, my dog died, right? And death is connected to a sadder emotion, and the intensity of death versus not getting a promotion differs. So we also measure the intensity of words choice that people use to identify how they are feeling and to what extent they are feeling the emotion. That is one side of the answer. The second side is there is not one model that exists today that gives exactly the same feeling or same emotions people are expressing. There it is a field that is coming with hundreds of models that tell that their model is better, but as and when machine learning increases, we face the problem of scaling, right? For one, say for 1,000 words, my model might detect exactly very good emotional understanding about exactly what people are feeling. But if you add 10,000 words, then there will be a little bit of off or the model doesn't fit well. Now, understanding the exact expression to what they're really feeling, I would say that what I am feeling at this point in time do change as time progresses. What I'm feeling right now is not what I will be expressing or feeling the next second. When that in itself, like if you ask somebody, they themselves could be a little confused on how they're expressing and feeling. So the point that I'm trying to make is it's very fluid. Emotion is a very fluid concept. Now, there is no model. I can again come back with this very strong argument saying even a therapist will not exactly feel or understand how one person is feeling. It's only a way of understanding on a very high level so that we can start working. So we are not trying to perfect everything to the dot. We are trying to work with what we have and push the field forward.
So, I mean, what Bhavana just said implies that there's agency is inherent. There's no way you can get to an emotion from somebody who is remote. There's always either the dictionary that you have is the agent or the therapist is the agent. So somehow there will always be some subjectivity in this field. Okay. I find Deepti's question very interesting. I recently heard about a young woman who is on the autistic spectrum and doesn't perceive some emotions. She doesn't comprehend what love is, so I don't know if this is comprehended in the wheel of emotion. I don't know either, but this is a fascinating question because you might be able to gain some medical insights through these modern techniques that we haven't had before.
Yeah, but again, we are not trying to psychoanalyze an individual, right? So that is the difference, right? Like, I mean, here we are looking at the data of a population, right? I mean, uh, overall, it is more like an uh, aggregate emotion of a population. I'm not sure that what we are doing is fixed for an individual. Now, and because we are doing it for a population, right, we cannot pinpoint to one person and say, oh, this person is feeling this.
Oh yeah,
That's
yeah. No, I wasn't suggesting this, but
the idea
I mean,
is,
this is big data. We might be able to infer things that we hadn't thought of before.
sure, definitely.
Uh, One thing what we could probably do for this very specific question is just collect data that comes from autistic people and see how that differs from non-autistic people, compare and contrast and see where the delta is, and kind of bring theories of psychology and map it out and conclude that yes, it is widely different. They cannot understand love or whatever. That can be done too, but again, we will have to identify a population of people that have specific needs and see how they work or how they express or if they express, and we can work through with that.
And who knows, we may discover that it's not they who don't understand love, it's just we who don't understand how they express.
That's we who don't understand what?
We who don't understand how they express love.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I think this is an interesting topic, and if we keep talking, we will keep for hours and hours. So I think let's wrap up this talk today, and I want to thank our speaker for today, Dr. Weber, Dr. Nithin, and Bhavanan, for this informative talk, and it's really nice discussion. I want to thank all of you guys for attending our seminar. And have a nice weekend, and see you for next week. So.
Okay, well, thank you, Maulud.
Thank you, everyone.